Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. I'm Billy Embody. With me is Shea Dixon, but we also have a big-time guest for the show today, National Director of Scouting and Rankings for On3, Charles Power. Charles, welcome back to the show. We've got a ton to get to today. You only have so much time doing what you do, so let's jump in here. We're going to focus on Louisiana to kick things off. And we got to talk about the biggest name right now as far as senior prospects go in LSU's 2024 class. That's Trae Green. What he's doing this year is really impressive, and that's why he's, at this point, your favorite prospect in LSU's class?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that right now. I mean, Trae Green is having a great senior season. I think I went through and before we got on, I kind of went back and watched all of his snaps, like charted his stats. I think I had him at maybe like 21 catches for 320 yards, 4 touchdowns in 4 games. So he's averaging about like 80 yards a game. And I think to me, like the production's really encouraging, but if you just watch how he is doing it, man, it is like super impressive. He's mainly playing like as a left outside receiver at Zachary, but I think he's moving the best we've ever seen him move. Like we've always known this is a really physically gifted prospect. I mean, this is a guy who was getting like high major basketball offers before he was even like a football prospect. So there's just, I think you're starting to see it all kind of coalesce and come together for Trae Green. And he is just a monster at the catch point, like acrobatic catches. He's coming down with touchdowns off the top of the head of the DBs. Just a guy who really looks like a catch point monster. And I think to me, that combined with just the fact he's moving so well, I think he cut a little weight. He's around 230 now. Has some bounciness in his movements. He's picking up some yards after the catch. I think when you're looking at him kind of within that tight end group, he's certainly one of the top tight ends in this cycle. I think he's currently ranks number 3 for us now. But a guy who is really ascending into his senior season, like early on in his senior season. And that's what we look for when we're ranking prospects. I think you want to tend to bet on guys who are continuing to improve, guys who are launching into college from a developmental perspective. And man, I think you have to be really, really encouraged with what Trae Green has done early on in his senior year. And I'm looking forward to continuing to watch it. But he is a guy that I'm excited to watch every week. And it's a deal where he makes a couple catches every game that are really kind of like eye popping. So I think if you're an LSU fan, just trust me when I'm saying you want to be really excited about him. I think he's a guy, whenever he puts his highlights out, everybody's going to kind of see what we're talking about. And that's one thing too, like we're at this point in the season where I think what like Cody Belair and I are watching maybe is not like everything's going to be public yet, but I think when the dust settles and Trae Green like puts out his senior highlights, I think LSU fans are going to be very excited when they see it. Just trust me when I say that. I tweeted a couple clips, over the past couple weeks, but yeah, he's doing it on a weekly basis at this point. And I think as Zachary gets deep into their playoff run, everybody's gonna kind of see what he's doing. So for sure, I think he's a guy that LSU fans should be very excited about.
We've shared those clips that you put out on the Bengal Tiger website. I obviously tried my best for Bengal Tiger subscribers to get full video of a game. Went out there. Trae did not play. Coach Brew with a game time decision there in a win over St. Aug. But Charles, quickly thought, because you watch so much, we've talked about this. This was the second most listened to, your last time on the podcast, second most listened to podcast we've had since post-Bama, the reactions to that win in overtime a year ago. So people love hearing from you. You watch everybody. I know how much time you put into it because we're also close friends away from work. Jaden Riddell, Caleb Odom, those are the top 2 tight ends. Is Trae Green realistically knocking on the door? Is LSU potentially in a spot where a monster season could lead to him having a case to be the best tight end in the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think if he keeps this up and he continues to play at this level, I think he'll certainly factor into that conversation. If you kind of look at where those guys are ranked right now within that tight end group, that kind of top tier of tight ends, I think Caleb Odom is like low 20s. Riddell is kind of in that, like, I think 30 to 35 range, and Trae Green is right after him. So I think when you look at the upward trajectory of Trae Green, what he's showing as a senior, And I think the opportunity to see all these guys in an all-star setting would also be extremely informative in a neutral setting. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the way things are currently tracking. I think it's safe to say that if he continues to play at this level, he will factor in to that conversation for sure.
When you look at Trae Green, you made a big jump. The On3 national team did. He went up almost 100 spots. That put him as the top number 2 overall prospect in Louisiana. Charles, there's been a rhetoric, and it's the truth so far, that heading into senior seasons, the number 1 and 2 players in the state were committed elsewhere. Obviously, Dominic McKinley to Texas A&M, being the number 1 player coming out of Acadiana. Wardell Mack committing to Florida. The On3 rankings have shuffled a bit, so no longer the top 2 headed out of state. Trae Green is now the number 2 player in the state, and he's just 2 spots overall behind Dominic McKinley, who trended back a little bit. Just your initial thoughts of these top 5 guys that you've got, which we've mentioned: McKinley, Green, Mack, but Gabe Relaford up at Evangel committed to A&M. He's soared for you a couple of times now, and the same with Deshaun McBride out of Denham Springs, who's one of LSU's highest rated commitments right now.
Yeah, I think this last rankings update was one where we did see some shuffling at the top of the state rankings in Louisiana. And I think if I was to start off, if I was going to peg 2 prospects in this top 5 that are clearly ascending as seniors, it's Trae Green and Gabriel Relaford. Those are the 2 guys who, and I think apart from Louisiana, I think nationally, if you go through, Cody and I go through and do checks like on a weekly basis, and like I was going through last night and I was going through like all of the defensive prospects. Gabriel Relaford, among all the defensive prospects nationally, is a guy who pops in a big way. Trae Green's like that on offense. So this is not something that's just singular to Louisiana. I think when you expand nationally, those are 2 guys who are having fantastic senior years and really like, I think in showing the full breadth of what they can do as like a total prospect from a talent perspective, ability perspective. So I would start with those 2 as the guys who moved up in our last rankings update based on how they've played since then. I think could continue to move up as we work on that. I think starting off with Dominic McKinley at 1 currently, he's a guy who has a lot of physical ability. He's a big athlete, like 6'5", around 300 pounds, a guy who, runs sub 5 seconds in the 40-yard dash plus length. I think with McKinley, we're just going to continue to monitor him and see how he plays just from like a physicality perspective, a production perspective. He's a guy who I think has a lot of upside physically. Want to see him continue to make strides as a senior. I thought he was actually pretty productive as a junior. It's a smaller sample size as a senior, so I want to make like sweeping conclusions off of 3-4 games. We'll kind of like let that sample size expand. And I don't think he's played quite as much as everybody else, but yeah, I think still believe in like the physical talent. I want to see him continue to put it together as a senior. In defensive line, I think too, in that group kind of that he's clustered in, there's some guys kind of like moving up. So some of this overall rankings can be factored in by prospects around you moving up or moving down. So there's kind of like some external factors there relative to where he would stack up kind of in the D-line group. And then Trae, we touched on it at 2. Wardell Mack is kind of interesting. The Florida commit, he's playing safety a lot as a senior. Like that's not his natural position. So he's kind of not like in a super favorable spot there. I think long term when you watch him play, I think he's probably most comfortable as a nickel at the next level. So a guy who's like played like a lot of corner, played a lot of offense, playing safety now. So not I think that's kind of a interesting situation relative to where he projects long term. I think it's kind of safe to say he's playing a little out of position as a senior, a guy who I think can really cover, but just as a pure like deep safety is a guy who's not super comfortable there right now, just given his lack of experience there. And then Deshaun McBride, I think a guy who is one of the headliners in LSU's class, a ton of physical ability. Like he is how you draw them up physically. It's like 6'2", 6'3", around 200 pounds, a plus athlete, a guy who is going to blow up the combine setting. He's really good in track. He's a ball hawk on Friday nights. I think with Deshaun McBride, I think right now, and I've watched a lot of Deshaun McBride, the flashes are really encouraging. He has an extremely high upside. He's a guy who needs to continue, I think, to get more consistent as a run defender, taking angles, physicality as a tackler. You see it in flashes. You want to see a little more consistency, but I think he is outstanding in coverage. A guy who has great ball skills. He's instinctual. He can run with receivers. So I think he's a guy who his cover skills are ahead of, but maybe like the run defense and open field tackling right now. But he's a guy who I think is going to benefit from just getting in college and getting that coaching, but and kind of just adjusting to the level. But I'm really high on his physical ability and ability and coverage. I think to me, he's a guy who has the body of a strong safety linebacker, like a guy who maybe could potentially grow into like a big like linebacker type. But I think from a skill perspective and athleticism perspective, he's like a free safety to me. So it's kind of an interesting little dichotomy there. But yeah, still really high on his upside. I mean, he's a top 100 prospect and has been for a little bit for us. And I think he's got a pretty high ceiling.
Yeah, I love Deshaun McBride. Getting to see him a couple times in the offseason was huge, just to see how he matched up athletically in coverage, especially for me. And obviously, he got it done on the field as a junior, but to see him go around some of the 7-on-7 circuits and match up against some big time guys was important. I do love Tecovas, our friends in Baton Rouge at the Tecovas Store in Perkins Rowe. You can check them out. Shea's got the hat on. He's putting it on like he's making a commitment to Tecovas, which means maybe we get him in a pair of Tecovas boots this football season. This is a time where you can really impress some friends. You can impress some people that you don't know and make new friends around Tecovas. This fine store and brand that we have partnered with is something that I love. I've got multiple pairs of Tecovas. They just do such a terrific job setting you up. When you walk into the store, you get greeted by really nice staff. You can have a beer or a drink or whatever you want while you shop for these really high quality boots and other Western wear, t-shirts, belts. They've got wallets. They've got duffel bags, all of those things. I was scrolling the site today and the Barrett really caught my eye there. I know it's at the top, but it really did. The toe on that one is impressive. So step into a Tecovas store and you're going to be greeted by that great staff. And then you're going to be able to also get your complimentary boot shines and get custom leather stamping that will make your boots or whatever you get truly one of a kind. So whether you're out at Tiger Stadium for Death Valley Saturday night, or you're just going out to dinner, or you're doing whatever, I can wear Tecovas just out and about all day. They're that comfortable. So get a pair of Tecovas, head to the store in Baton Rouge at Perkins Rowe. Tell them the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast sent you, and check them out. Tecovas, always supplying the goods, just like Charles Power is on the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. And Charles, you watch this LSU group of commits, and this is a group that I feel like we have a lot of just different evaluation points overall. Let's look at some guys with upside, both in Louisiana, outside of the state. Do you have a couple that stand out to you? One from in-state, one from out-of-state, from an upside perspective that maybe fans aren't talking enough about?
Yeah, I think with the in-state commits, just when you're talking ceiling and upside, I think you have to start with Colin Bilio, the receiver. Colin Bilio is a guy who, we all saw him at LSU's camp 2 years ago. I think he was a guy who was maybe he hadn't even played high school football yet. I think if I recall, I think he was a basketball guy who was gonna play football his junior year. So yeah, I think he's a guy just first off physically, he's 6'3", 190, runs well. He's a really good basketball player, basketball first athlete, and a guy who I think is just really just like scratching the surface of his potential as a player. I think you love the size and speed. I think he has the ability to make like some acrobatic catches for sure. I think the biggest thing with Colin Bilio is just going to be refining his skills as a receiver, just getting consistent, like with his hands, catching a lot of footballs. I think that's something that's he's gonna improve on once he gets to the college level and is playing receiver full time and kind of gets that like high end coaching he's gonna get. But there's no question. I think when you just look at him physically, there's a lot to like there. But he's a guy who I think you're going to need to bring along. Probably not one I would expect to like come in and start like right away. But with how LSU recruits at receiver, I think they had that luxury to kind of develop him, get him like some scout team reps. But he's a guy who I think after 2 or 3 years in the program, he could like be set up for an explosion. Like to me, a little different prospect, but if you look at a guy like Xavier Legette at South Carolina, Xavier Legette was a guy who was kind of a multi-purpose athlete, very similar from like a size and athleticism perspective to Kylan Bilo, and one that we ranked as like a low 4-star at 24/7. And you fast forward like 4 years later, and he's like, at one point, like as of a week ago, was leading the country in receiving yards. So I think it's a similar like kind of like developmental track there with Bilo, a guy who I think is a long-term play, high ceiling type. And watched a good bit of him as a senior early on. Hasn't had like a ton of targets yet, but I think he's one that we'll continue to monitor throughout the next couple months and rounding out his senior year. But he's a guy who has a lot of upside. Out of state, I think my pick would be Ori Williams, the offensive tackle. I think physically Ori like stacks up as well at the position like as anybody. I mean, he's a high end physical talent, like 34+ inch arms. Just a big guy. What's he like? I think like 6'7", like 300 pounds. Just guy who moves well. I think Ori, what's interesting to me is watching him play basketball. And a lot of times you watch these big linemen play basketball and I think you can get a good indication of just like the lateral agility, overall movement skills. And he really is fleet of foot on the basketball court, maybe even more so than he currently is in football. I think he's a guy who's going to, as he continues to get experience and get more comfortable on the football field, is going to kind of settle in there. Billy, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he like missed maybe his sophomore, junior year due to transfer. So he kind of has not played as much meaningful football, I think, as a lot of other 2024 prospects to this stage. So he's a little like earlier on his developmental curve than you would see from a lot of his peers. So I think he's has the potential to take a jump from a developmental perspective, over the course of the next year or so. But he's a guy who I think just has everything you want physically. He's exactly how you draw him up, and I think he moves pretty well. And I'm looking forward to kind of tracking the rest of his senior season and kind of look and see if there's some growth and further development with him. But and also too, I mean, he's a guy at a priority position, offensive tackle. You look at how LSU's recruited offensive tackle, similar to Billy. I don't think he's gonna have to rush to get on the field necessarily. So I think LSU's gonna have the luxury to develop him, and he's a guy who could pop up in a couple years and be, has like starting high end potential possibly. So yeah, I think when you pair him with a guy like Ethan Callaway, he's probably a little more developed now, a little more, like polished, I guess you would say. I think that's like a really nice tackle combo. And I think when you look at how LSU's recruited offensive line since Brian Kelly's taken over, I think you'd be really encouraged relative to kind of what they started with and what they have now and kind of the direction they're moving. So I would be really encouraged if I was an LSU fan with how offensive line recruiting is going.
Yeah, he did have to play sub-varsity as a sophomore, so you nailed that one as well on Ori Williams, Charles. Okay, you want to bring up the quarterbacks, or did you want to chime in on?
No, I like his picks. I like both picks. That's who I would roll with. I like Juwan Johnson too. You know I'm a Juwan Johnson stan, but Kyle, I like the pick as well. All right, it's that time. Quarterback. Let me preface this by saying, Charles, you were there the very first time LSU saw Colin Hurley in person. He came to a camp with a ton of kids 2 years ago at LSU. You've watched every snap that he's played over the last 2 years, year and a half, I guess, of what is now his final season because he reclassified. And you were at the Elite 11 and also at a number of 7-on-7 events he's thrown. I'd venture to guess you might watch Colin Hurley second most to Joe Sloan. So give us your thoughts. You've got him rated as a 4-star, non-top 300. Obviously, you see right there, number 21 quarterback in America. Just your take on where he's at as a guy who reclassified and is now about halfway through his final year.
Yeah, I think with Colin Hurley starting off, he's a top arm talent, and I think that's something that really shines in the camp setting. He has a loose, big arm. I think he has the ability to make all the throws, just with his arm strength and ability to push the ball downfield. I think there is just some natural and then trained ability with his arm that I think stacks up among the best in the class. I think that going into, I guess, maybe the past 2 seasons with Colin Hurley, you really kind of wanted to see him put that all together and kind of manifest itself on the high school football field, which I think as we evaluate these quarterbacks, for me, really the senior year is you're kind of drilling down on the player and you're really seeing, is this guy taking strides as a player? I think most blue chip quarterbacks should dominate their competition. I study all of the trends with NFL draft picks and kind of know like certain thresholds they need to meet. And I think, you look for guys who are just playmakers, can carry their offenses and produce, but to go with just the physical talent, the projectable talent that you want to see. So that's all kind of to preface. I've watched a ton of Colin Hurley, like you said, Shea. I think the flashes continue to be very encouraging. But I think the biggest thing for Hurley is just being more consistent. There are times in games where his training can kind of like abandon that a little bit, and his mechanics can break down, and that can cause some some accuracy issues or decision making issues. I would also say too, he's played like some tough games, like that game that Billy went to, that American Heritage game. Like American Heritage is a really talented team. So like I look at, I don't make like sweeping judgments off of tough matchups or single game sample sizes. Like we have the luxury of like taking in the full body of work with these quarterbacks. So it's a deal where I think, ideally you would want to see Hurley make more of a jump than he probably has to this point. I'm personally am not super bullish on reclassifications, particularly at quarterback, because I think quarterback is such a performance craft and confidence position that I think everything we look at from the position tends to point to you wanting to be as good and as really dominant, but as good as you can possibly be before you matriculate to the next level. That goes from college to the NFL as well. I think when you look at 3-and-out quarterbacks, there's a lot of trends that show that 3-and-out quarterbacks who play early in their college careers tend to be more successful in the NFL. And I subscribe to that thought as well for high school to college prospects. So, I'm not sure that reclassifying necessarily helped him a ton. I think it's early to say, but I think with Colin Hurley, I think if you're an LSU fan, you just want to see him continue to make strides with the consistency and accuracy and decision making. But there's no doubt. I mean, he's definitely has a big arm. I think he's improved his mobility, functional mobility a little bit this year. I'm not sure that that's something that you can necessarily snap your fingers and make huge strides kind of once you're relatively physically developed like he is. But yeah, I mean, I'm eager to watch the rest of his senior year. I think there's, certainly the potential that he could continue to improve and get hot and build some confidence. And I think that possibility is on the table, but that's something we'll be watching, for the next couple months.
When you look at the quarterback recruiting of LSU, right now, the biggest thing to talk about is these 2 2025s that they're after in Bryce Underwood, who we'll talk about in a little bit, but we're going to address George McIntyre right now. One, because he's right in your backyard, so I want to give the guy who's local some love, but also we'll just talk about Bryce Underwood later. I'll leave it at that. And George McIntyre was just in town for the Arkansas game to check out LSU. This is a big, tall, multi-sport athlete. What are your thoughts on him just overall?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, George McIntyre is a guy that was identified as a top quarterback in 2025 pretty early. Like you said, Billy, he is – I mean, I know y'all have seen him in person. He's a really tall kid. I think he's well over 6'5", probably close to 6'6". Kind of has a thinner build, but when you put him on the scale, he's not like super light. I think he's going to end up being probably like 6'6", 220 plus maybe. Kind of once he continues to fill out, but yeah, he's a two-sport athlete, really good basketball player, a guy who has like high major offers in basketball. I think he had an Arizona State offer, maybe like even like 2 years ago, and quick arm. I think for a taller quarterback, a lot of times you see these taller quarterbacks who have like elongated motions. That's not the case with McIntyre. He's got a quick arm. Everything's pretty smooth mechanically. And he moves well. He's a bouncy athlete, a guy who can create outside of structure. And I think just has some of the tools and skills that are pretty projectable at the position. You know, I'm big on quarterbacks playing basketball. I think when you look at a lot of the top quarterbacks in college football and in recent NFL drafts, there were guys who were really good, like high school basketball players. I think of like a Drake May. Think of CJ Stroud was like a dead eye spot up shooter. That's something I think is certainly a positive. Now George McIntyre has had an interesting junior year. I don't know what his stats are because they aren't like public, and that's something we'll probably have to dig on when we're starting to work on 2025 rankings. But he at Brentwood Academy plays a very tough schedule. I think they're like 1-6 right now. And it's a tough schedule. I think when you look in the state of Tennessee, a lot of the best high school teams are these private school teams, and like they've played a couple of nationally ranked teams, and it is a pretty interesting junior year for George McIntyre. I think his play's been a little up and down, but I think he's had some really good games. He had a 3-touchdown game against Baylor School in Chattanooga that has a bunch of Power 5, like high-end Power 5 prospects. So I'm going to go out and see him in a couple weeks, see him live. I saw him live last fall, but he's a guy who certainly has some promise. I think like a lot of these junior quarterbacks, kind of want to see how he puts it all together. And that's something I think we'll really focus on as a senior, but midway through his junior year, I think you see some encouraging signs, but you also see areas for improvement as well.
Yeah, I'll be out there seeing him very soon too. So LSU heavily involved with him. We'll talk about Bryce Underwood in a bit. But first, I got to tell you guys about our friend Zack Payne with Green State Wealth Management. You guys, we know you guys are listening to this podcast. You've heard us talk about Zack and his team before. But if you need help with 401ks, wealth management, retirement planning, investments, it doesn't matter. Zack Payne and his team can help you through all of that. If you're just trying to save a little bit of money, if you're trying to have a major goal accomplished in life, or just set yourself up to retire very early, Zack Payne and his team will help you guys through that process. And he's a huge LSU supporter of LSU football. And that's why he wanted to jump on the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast as a sponsor with us. So be sure to check out Zack Payne and his team at Green State Wealth Management. You can email him, Zack Payne, ZACHPAYNE at greenstatewm.org. And you can get his thoughts on what you can do to help yourself out financially. You can also give him a call at 319-358-5632. So reach out to Zack and his entire team at Green State Wealth Management. They'll be there to help you through all your financial needs. Shea, we are still rolling on here with Charles Power. And one of the biggest questions that we get on the board is, well, is LSU going to address defensive back even more? Well, they have multiple commitments on that front. They're still working on flipping an SEC target as well from the city of New Orleans. You wrote about that on the board, but Charles, let's take a look at these 2024 commits, and we might have to go rapid fire because there are so many. They've got Kai Bates, Andre Evans, Deshaun McBride we talked about, Joel Rogers, Juwan Johnson, Wallace Foster. It's quite the group that they have at defensive back. What are some of your takeaways from watching them?
Yeah, I will start with Kai Bates because I like literally just watched him right before we got on. So Kai Bates is relatively new to corner. This is a guy who made the switch to corner, I think the final 4 games of his junior season and really kind of took very naturally to the position. I think when you watch Kai Bates, he is kind of has a lot of innate skills in coverage. He's a bouncy mover. I think he has very good instincts. He had a huge game, I believe, against Orlando Jones, top program, kind of crosstown rivalry in Orlando, and had 2 picks. I think he has 3 picks in the season. So, very good instincts. I think he's good in like off coverage, and obviously has ball skills being a former receiver. I think Kai is going to have to probably adjust a little bit to just playing like some of the other factors of just playing defense, like run defense. That's something that's also, I probably sound like a broken record with that. But that's something that you see a lot. That's not something that's singular to Kai Bates or to Sean McBride. It's something you see a lot with defensive back prospects, especially guys who are kind of like more of your athlete type. So I think that's an area I think where it's kind of a given that he'll improve that. But yeah, I think the coverage ability, his ability to stay attached, and he's just a smooth, functional mover. So I think you have to be like what you've seen from Kai Bates as a senior. And I think also too, I would note, I think he's playing better and better on a weekly basis, and that's probably a product of him just continuing to get experience. I mean, he is very new to the position still, so I think probably under 10 games playing corner in his high school career. So I think you have to be excited about just the progress he's shown and his ability. So he's a guy I would start off with. Andre Evans is a guy who has a ton of physical ability. I mean, y'all have seen Andre Evans at camp. He is just kind of how you draw him up physically. He's got plus length. He's like a 10-400 meter guy. I think the biggest thing with Andre Evans is kind of just going to be further development, transferring those skills onto the field. He's a guy who I think is probably best suited for certain schemes. My comparison for Andre Evans, at least in terms of like stylistically as a player, reminds me a little bit of Keely Ringo. Now, Keely Ringo was like a top 10 prospect, and I think probably a little more progressed at the same stage in his career. But when you look at kind of the strengths areas for improvement with Andre Evans in terms of the type of player, I think of Keely Ringo, a guy who has a lot of straight line speed, is going to need to continue improving just like the ball skills, coverage instincts, and like lateral agility maybe, but he has a lot of tools to work with. Like I think if you're a DB's coach, you have to be excited about coaching a guy like Andre Evans because he has such a high upside, and is a guy who I think if Andre Evans hits, he has a chance of hitting in a big way. But he's got some areas for improvement and some room for development. But I think the physical tools certainly stack up among the best. We already kind of touched on Deshaun McBride. I think he is a really high upside cover safety. Joel Rogers is playing a lot. Joel Rogers and Jawan Johnson, I think both are playing a ton of quarterback this year. So those guys are kind of projections at DB. I think we've seen a little more of Joel Rogers at DB over the last couple of years. I'm encouraged by just the physicality he's shown in those glimpses. He's a guy who I think just from a temperament perspective has the chance to be like a tone setter on the back end for LSU. A guy who, it wouldn't be a shock to see him be like a captain of the defense if he ends up being a starter. And then Jawan Johnson's obviously having a really strong senior year, just as an overall football player, quarterback. So I think those are guys that it's a little bit of a projection based on how much they play quarterback, but that's something that I think it doesn't hurt them at all. It's just something that I think we kind of work to get clarity on throughout the course of the cycle. Because when you look at a lot of these top NFL DBs, especially safeties, play a lot of quarterback. There's a lot of quarterback to DB conversions. So I think it's a pretty good group. I think there's a lot of variety, a lot of different skill sets in there, and I think LSU has a shot to hit on several of those guys, and I think they'll probably have a bunch of starters from that group long term.
I remember when Dave Aranda got to LSU, he said that the type of linebackers he wanted were guys who played quarterback in high school. So I guess anybody defensively who's got that quarterback mindset, it helps out. LSU fans have been begging for D-line info. We're not asking you for that. You're not the recruiting scoop guru in that regard, but when we talked yesterday, you did bring up an interesting point. I offered up, are there just not a lot of D tackles out there? And you said, no, that's not necessarily the case. And in your opinion, it's more so that a handful of teams seem to be dominating the D tackle landscape.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the D line position, it is like a little bit of an arms race, and I think you see certain programs like really prioritize that and effectively recruit the position and kind of stack D linemen. Some of it's a philosophy thing. I mean, some of it's just like prioritizing it. But you look at like Georgia. I mean, Georgia rotates so many defensive linemen. Those guys don't play a ton of snaps for them because they platoon them at such a high level. And Georgia obviously has a great sales pitch for defensive linemen. So I think you have to start with Georgia stacking D linemen. Texas A&M, the last several cycles, has really like loaded up on defensive linemen. And then you look at a program like Ohio State, who I think has made that kind of a priority in this recruiting cycle. I think they come out of their games against like Michigan and Georgia and think, man, like if we just had a couple of these like big blue chip 5-star type of defensive linemen, that could maybe be the difference in some of these games. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit, there's a little bit less dispersion at the defensive line position, maybe than you see from other spots. And I think it's in part because you can play so many at once. A lot of defensive linemen don't necessarily like prioritize like playing time, maybe like you would, or targets like you would as like at like receiver or other positions. Certainly not something like quarterback, but I think that's a factor with it as well. So D-line recruiting is interesting. I mean, I think when you look at, there's a lot of different team building strategies you can go for. I think you've seen some teams kind of pivot to the portal, just go with like a very like long-term development plan. I think about like kind of what Florida State's done there. They've had like portal supplementation with guys who are like 5th-year seniors, kind of an older defensive line. I think it's interesting. I think you're seeing a lot of different strategies in college football, and I think there's definitely more than one way to go about it. But from the high school level, I think that's a position where I think you've seen a little bit of arms race and kind of certain schools really stacking that position maybe than you see at other positions.
Well, speaking of stacking, LSU fans and Bengal Tiger subscribers in particular are stacking up their Rogue Shop products for this football season, especially after LSU's loss to Ole Miss, probably in need of all of those things that Rogue Shop provides, which is why you should check them out, rogueshop.com. Be sure to use the promo code Bengal Tiger for 10% off your order. And look, whether you're in it for pain relief, anxiety, sleep help, all those things, Richard and Shar will help you through this entire process as you try to get just feel better in a natural way. They've got CBD, THC, they've got the Delta 8 gummies. It's all 100% natural, hemp-derived THC. If you go that route, the CBD oils are something that Shea just checked out. The pain cream is something for me after I get done with playing hockey. You can rub it on certain spots that are sore, my hips or back or what have you, and that helps out. But see, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, there's Shar right there. I just need to tell her that we're taking you guys a tour of rogueshop.com. Check them out, rogueshop.com. Use the promo code Bengal Tiger for 10% off your order today. I told you, Chuck, that we were going to roll to Bryce Underwood, and I feel like Shea can attest, we get a text a week at least about Bryce Underwood. It's either live on Friday night or it's, hey, I'm rewatching last week's game. Watch this throw. Watch that. And he is one of the best quarterbacks, I think, in the last few years, at least from my angle. He's the number one prospect. LSU's in on him. What are your thoughts on the 5-star from Michigan?
Yeah, and I have to be careful sometimes with like placing expectations on guys who are 16-year-olds like Bryce Underwood. He's young for the class. It's scary to think this guy could be a 2026 prospect from an age perspective. But man, his talent is really, really exciting. And I think when you look at the pure physical talent, I don't see anybody in high school football right now that has the combination of arm talent and athleticism that he has, like just the projectable physical tools that he has at quarterback. it would be almost hard for me to come up with someone who's like a close second at this stage, just with his ability to push the ball downfield. I mean, I think if I had to say the 10-15 most impressive throws I've seen from quarterbacks this fall, Bryce Underwood might have like 7 of them. He's a guy who makes just really hard to imagine throws on a weekly basis. And a guy who's continued to get better. He's I think has a good shot of being a 4-time state champion in the state of Michigan. And just the upside from an arm talent perspective is really, really exciting. And I think, I mean, he's a guy that, I think is worthy of all the hype and praise. And, certainly that comes with with the conditions that he continues to develop and continues to get better. But one reason why I was pretty bullish on him early on as a number 1 overall type of quarterback was I think he had some really positive indicators of a guy who is not topped out, has a lot of developmental upside and kind of a continued track to get better and better. Because I think there's clear areas where he can continue to improve, which is crazy to think about given how good he is right now. So, he's really exciting. I think just the ability to stretch the field, man. He does not strain to throw the ball 60 yards off of like a skip jump, not like barely setting your feet type of throws. Just kind of a next level arm talent as a downfield passer, a guy who can stretch the field vertically. So, he's one who I think has immense potential. And, when you look at every cycle, there's kind of the reality is there's not always true slam dunk number 1 overall prospects at quarterback every cycle. But I think he certainly has that potential to be a true slam dunk number 1 overall, kind of like a guy like a Caleb Williams. They're obviously they're very different prospects, but I think he has that kind of upside. And, we'll continue to watch his junior year and of course his senior year. But I think Bryce Underwood is a guy who I look forward to watching him every week. And it's a guy who is I'm always excited to talk about because he is a really, really exciting and fun, high upside prospect at the most important position in sports. So he's a guy that if you're LSU and you can land him, that's a situation where you could not be happier if you're an LSU fan and you land Bryce Underwood.
We've got a few minutes left here with Charles before we got to get out of here. So let's finish with this. Every LSU fan's dream, Charles. Many have moved beyond the 24 class. They're focused on 2025, and they say, well, Harlem Berry, On3 RPM, New Orleans guy, number 1 running back on the On3 rankings. He's trending to LSU. Dorian Moore, the number 2 overall receiver on the On3 industry rankings, giving Ryan Williams a run for his money as potentially one of the top receivers in the country coming out of Duncanville. He's committed now. And we've just talked about Underwood, Joe Sloan, getting them really in the top 2 with Michigan. So briefly, kind of your thoughts on Berry and Moore, who have both been on fire again this year as juniors.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're LSU, that's a complete dream scenario if you can land those guys. I think back to the 90s Cowboys when they had the triplets with Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. I guess that would be LSU's version of the triplets if they could land these guys. And we haven't given out a ton of 5 stars early on in 2025, but I think it's certainly reasonable to say that those guys are all tracking as 5-star prospects. So if you're LSU and you land a number 1 overall 5-star quarterback, a 5-star running back, which there's not a ton of 5-star running backs anymore with just kind of how that position's valued, and then a 5-star receiver, I mean, that's complete dream scenario for LSU. I think with Harlem Berry, Harlem Berry is a guy that we've really loved for a long time. I just love the run style. I mean, he reminds me of Jamal Charles from a running perspective, a guy who has, obviously the top end track speed, but it's very functional. He toggles back and forth. I think he sees blocks really well. A guy who plays the speed of the game is slow for him, with his vision. And obviously he can catch the ball in the backfield as well. I think the biggest thing with Harlem Berry Just want to see like how he ends up from like a size perspective. I'm not sure he's ever going to be like a big guy, but just kind of meeting like that threshold. Like it would be great to see Harlem Berry kind of leave college as like a 200+ pounder. But just in terms of like I guess with his, when you're projecting durability, but he is really exciting. And I'm pretty high on this group of 2025 running backs. So I think the fact that, being number one at running back in 2025 is, to me, pretty high praise when you look at the rest of that group. So love Harlem Berry and DeCorey Moore. I think of all of the receivers that Cody Belair and I saw during the summer, he was the guy that I think we were probably the most impressed by, just with what he showed on the camp circuit. And then obviously comes out his junior season and has a monster game against South Oak Cliff. Now, evaluating guys at Duncanville, prospects at Duncanville, is kind of interesting because Duncanville really kind of just kills everybody they play. So I'm not sure we're going to see a ton of DeCorey and Moore from like a extended sample size or target share, really kind of once Duncanville gets in the playoffs. But there's no question. I mean, I think just given what we saw in person and kind of what he did early on so far in his junior year, I mean, he's a guy who strikes fear in defenses. Like I think he has a bunch of just like, you talk about like gravity, like relative to like a Steph Curry, like with what he does to defenses. I think DeCorey Moore's ability to take the top off and also make plays with the ball in his hands. I think he has significant gravity as an outside receiver and a guy who can move around and do a lot of different stuff with the ball in his hands. So those three are Bryce Underwood, Harlem Berry, DeCorey Moore are three really exciting underclassmen prospects that I think if you're LSU and you land those three, I mean, that would be a complete dream scenario. So those are guys I love talking about those guys. I guess you can tell I'm always excited to talk about them. But yeah, I mean I think if you're LSU and you land that, like those guys, I mean you're looking at a lot of points and offensive explosion in a couple of years once they get on campus.
35 yards a catch this year for DeCorey and Moore.
Yeah, not surprising. After seeing him at OT7, it was a situation where it's kind of like he does what he wants to do. So,
yeah, he's a part of that group that is continuing to roll at Duncanville, and LSU obviously has Caden Durham there, 4-star running back in 2024 as well. We'll have to have you on again, Charles, because our time has run out. The studio is going to the big dogs of the On3 YouTube channel, I'm sure. But look, you are our big dog. You always come on and chat it up with us on the eval side of things, give people a really good insight into how everything comes together. So as always, thanks for the time.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. I'll catch up with you all a little later.
That was it for this edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. Hit that subscribe button to our YouTube channel, wherever you follow the podcast at. We will catch you guys next week with another edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. For Shea Dixon and Charles Power, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening.